Awesome.
Okay. And welcome to the Twins Daily Trade Deadline Talk. It's just going to be Matt Lenz and I, Brock Beauchamp. Well, I have to mute myself. Sorry about that.
I don't think I knew that's how you pronounced your last name. I was always Beauchamp.
Yes, it is.
Beauchamp, that
I'm
sounds a
sorry,
lot
I'm
nicer.
having an echo here, and I'm going to have to turn my volume way down.
Yeah, it's good to have people on the stream here. Gonna chat about the Minnesota Twins trade deadline, kind of the different routes that they can go. This will kind of lead up to a video that we will post on Twins Daily a little bit later today, just talking about kind of what the Twins should accomplish here over the next week ahead of the trade deadline. And then after the trade deadline, kind of a similar video of what can the Twins accomplish over the next, 2 months that's left in the season, even if they are selling and kind of out of the playoff picture. I think the trade deadline will kind of give us an idea of what 2026 might look like and beyond. And so we'll look at going to look at what the next 2 months can look like, what we should watch for, even though we might not be in the playoff hunt. So, but before all of that, yeah, we got a Twins trade deadline here in a week, and lots of rumors swirling around with Joe Ryan being one of the bigger names. Although everything I've seen and read is that the Twins aren't necessarily looking to move Joe Ryan, but just looking to, but open to hearing offers. And I know Joe Ryan made some controversial comments, maybe. I don't think they're that controversial, I guess, but some people maybe interpret them differently, that he is himself open to being traded. And I think Griffin Jax kind of doubled down on that and said the same. I didn't totally see his quote, but again, I've just seen kind of Twins Twitter taking that and interpreting that he is more than willing to be traded, maybe even happy to be traded. But Brock, did you see the tweet by chance? Or not the tweet, but
I
whatever
haven't
Griffin said?
I haven't seen that yet, but I just wanted to explain a little bit why we're the ones doing the live stream instead of some of the other people you might be more aware of or familiar with Twins Daily. I run all the other sites for Diamond Centric, so I run a total of 7 baseball sites, and Matt Lenz here does, I'd say, over half of our rumors for all 6 sites that we directly run. And so we have been just on top of Twitter feeds and MLBTR and all the rumor mills, keeping abreast of who's looking for what and what the Twins might be able to offer them. And the Twins, now that they're sellers, are, in my opinion, probably the most interesting seller at this deadline because of not only their pitching, but their incredibly high-end pitching. Everybody wants to talk to the Twins right now, unless you're like the Brewers or the Mariners, and that might be the end of the list of teams who are like, our pitching's good, we're happy with it. But the other 15 contenders are all have the Twins on their radar.
Yeah, the Twins are. I think this might have been another tweet that I saw earlier, and it is kind of this weird juxtaposition is the right word, but the Twins are a unique seller in that they have a lot of high end talent.
Yes.
As Brock just said, Joe Ryan, Griffin Jax, Joan Duran, um, and so it's really interesting to see that they're a mediocre club, right? Even though they have this high end talent, and that doesn't even mention Byron Buxton, um, Carlos Correa, although he definitely has kind of underperformed a little bit this year. And then, of course, Pablo Lopez, who is under contract for a few years, injured, not going to be traded, everything like that. But yeah, just kind of a unique position that they're in where they have a lot of high end talent, which not a lot of sellers can say. But also, I don't know if they're going to move that high end talent. I think the only thing I've really
Yeah.
seen came from John Heyman, which I know some people take John Heyman and what he says with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Sometimes he maybe just throws something on the wall to see if it'll stick. But according to John Heyman, the Twins are
Hello.
seriously listening on just their rental players is all we've really heard. But yeah, they have high end options if they want to just kind of go all in on selling and maybe a little bit of a rebuild. They have guys that can can really bring in some good top end prospects. So let me see here, Brock. I'll turn it back over to you, and I'll see
Yeah.
what's going on with my 5-year-old.
Yeah, no problem. As a father myself, I totally understand. So the Twins, they obviously have the really high end pitching that's controllable. Let's see. So all three of their pitchers that have been kind of dangled on the market have about 2.5 years of control. Joe Ryan, Duran, and Jax. But beyond that, their rentals are more intriguing than a lot of the what the other sellers are doing. It's not like the Athletics are overflowing with talent that teams are clamoring over. They have some interesting pieces, but not like the Twins, where they have both the long term pieces in those three pitchers, but they also have several rental pieces that can fit on almost any team. They have Colomb, who is a rental, but he's a dominant lefty. There aren't a ton of those on the market. You have Willie Castro, who isn't as versatile as he was, say, 2 or 3 seasons ago, but he can still fit on almost any roster. And there are some teams like the Padres or the Cubs where he's an excellent fit because they just don't have a bench. And Castro can play a role as a starter. He's kind of a, second division starter, but you shift him over to a bench role and he is really a difference maker in that role, especially if your bench is like the Cubs has somebody like Vidal Brujan on it with his WRC plus of like -5, whatever it was before he was released. And then you also have Harrison Bader, who almost any team, again, would be happy to have Harrison Bader because you need a center fielder in a pinch. Bader is more than capable of doing that, like legitimately. But also, if you're just looking for a platoon guy and you're like, oh man, in the seventh and eighth and ninth innings, when we have a lead, our left fielder sucks. We need somebody out there who can fill in competently with the bat, but also is going to be a stellar left fielder. Well, Bader's that guy. So the Twins have both short term and long term pieces that are just really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, one thing I saw somebody had made a TikTok on just when Heyman did kind of drop that report or rumor or whatever you want to call it. Somebody mentioned, extending Bader for the Twins, which is an interesting idea, just because he has been so great this year as kind of that fourth outfield option. Even with Buxton being healthy, he's gotten plenty of run playing on nearly a daily basis and being productive. Um, he does have a mutual option for next season, but I think it's basically a foregone conclusion that, I mean, a team would love to exercise that option, but I think based off of this year alone, Bader is going to decline that option and see what he can get on the open market. So he's definitely a rental player, but and one that I would imagine is going to have a decent market here over the next week. I don't think he'd be a Twin on August 1st anymore, but definitely something that just kind of piqued my interest. Like, if for whatever reason, if they were to extend Bader, that probably wouldn't be a great decision just because you can get something for him. But it's also not like the worst decision ever, depending on how they approach this deadline. And that's going to be kind of the topic I want to talk about on my long form video later today is like, yeah, so far all we've heard for the confirmed for the most part is that they are looking to sell off these rental pieces. And so to me, I kind of interpret that as they believe in this core. They're going to retool and turn their sights to 2026. And, it's probably going to be, we're in the same boat. It's going to be a very similar off season. They're not going to make a lot of any splashes. They're not going to have a lot of money to spend. They're mostly going to kind of roll things back in 2026 and just hope for a better outcome. Obviously, if ownership changes and that could impact things, and maybe the Twins all of a sudden will be a team that is aggressive on the free agent market. I laugh just because that's in our lifetime that's not anything we've ever talked about. I've been able to talk about, but But yeah, I mean, I'd love to see Harrison Bader back with the Twins. You can't ask for a much better fourth outfield option who is a really good complement to Trevor Larnach and Matt Wallner, who have, Wallner just generally has struggled this year. Larnach has been a little bit better, but both generally struggle against lefties. And so he brings a good platoon option. And then, yeah, if, something does happen to Buxton, he can play a very serviceable, maybe even above average center field. And so you have that, which is kind of something over the last few years, I feel like we're always trying to chase, right? We had Jake Cave a handful of years ago was kind of that fourth outfield guy, but he wasn't very productive. Michael A. Taylor was brought in for a year as that fourth outfield guy. He had, I don't necessarily know if it was a career year, but one of his best years, and he
Yeah.
hasn't been the same since. And so, again, I don't anticipate Bader being a Twin on August 1st, but would definitely love if the Twins were able to bring him back next year as kind of a more stable option and not having this merry-go-round of having to change the fourth outfielder every year.
You see, I actually take the exact opposite tack on that. Is Michael A. Taylor is the example I'm thinking of, where the Twins got maybe not a career year, but something close to it out of him. And he's out of baseball 2 years later. Harrison Bader's career OPS is somewhere around 90, 92, something like that. This year, he's like a 110. I say you just take that production, thank him on his way out the door, and move on, because as a 31-year-old having a well outside his career norms offensive season, I don't have any faith that that will happen again. So I am totally content to say thank you, Mr. Bader. Be on your way, get something for him and trade. And Matt Trueblood, our managing editor, has just reminded me that Vidal Brujan is still on the Cubs roster. I am incorrect. He has not been released. He is still comically bad, but he is still actually on the roster. But like the Brewers don't have many needs, but even they might call the Twins. They don't need any pitching whatsoever, but they might call the Twins because they do have some question marks about the left side of their infield, but they still want to start their guys, or at least give their guys a lot of run. Somebody like Willie Castro is a great fit over there. He's not a guy you want to play at shortstop, unfortunately, but as a third baseman, I think he's more than capable of holding down the position, 3 to 4 times a week through the rest of the season.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wrote that rumor up yesterday. I think it was maybe Bowden, if I'm recalling correctly, who said that the Brewers were looking to upgrade the left side of their infield. And I agree, Castro would be a good fit for that. I also just thought it was interesting just because, so their shortstop, Joey Ortiz, glove first guy, but like terrible hitter. I think his OPS is like below 600 on the year. So
Yeah.
that seems like an obvious upgrade there. Maybe they find somebody who doesn't quite have the glove of Joey Ortiz, but has a better bat. So they look for a little bit of balance. But I was surprised just how he grouped together the left side, just because Caleb Durbin, I know he's a rookie. It's a small sample size. Who knows if he can sustain it? But I saw a tweet that since May 1st, he's been offensively, he's been one of the better third basemen in baseball. And so I found that to be interesting. And then actually on the contrary, Rosenthal posted an article today, just kind of talking about how the Brewers are kind of keeping their cards close to their chest.
They always do.
Yep. And he said, rumors are floating that they want to upgrade the left side of the infield, but if you ask them about the left side of their infield publicly, they talk about them as if they are. I forget who the third baseman was, but he said, that Joey Ortiz is Derek Jeter and Caleb Durbin is, whatever
Durbin,
Hall of Fame third baseman. So interesting there, but I agree. I think Willie Castro would be a great fit for the Brewers. He'd be a great fit for the Cubs. It's kind of wild to think that one of the best teams in baseball and the Cubs have somebody like Vidal Brujan on their bench that is just such a negative player that it's just surprising to see a team. And that's kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, just kind of this weird state the Twins are in, that again, they're sellers, but they have a lot of top end talent that they can take advantage of.
Yeah.
And I think Willie Castro fits that.
part of the reason why Twins fans have every right to be so disappointed and frustrated because this team's full of talent, especially on the pitching side. I was on the Twins Off Daily podcast last night, and as pre-work to doing that, I noticed the Twins still have the fourth best FIP in baseball. I mean, there's really no excuse for them, especially the way the rest of the AL Central has fallen apart. There's no excuse for them to be in this position, but they are. The reality is they are, and they need to sell. And Falvey having basically run it back for the third season in a row, and we're getting diminishing returns with every season, as is typical when you try that strategy. It's time to shake things up, and I really hope that they move at least one of the three pitchers that are controlled because you can really get some significant returns for any of those guys. And the Twins have shown themselves to be at least moderately competent at developing pitching.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I actually kind of take I just made another TikTok earlier today, actually kind of saying the obvious. Earlier this week, I kind of did a review of the first 100 games of the season and talked a lot about that. Like the Twins, their bullpen is elite. They're starting pitching, even without Pablo Lopez, a hurt Bailey Ober, Zebby Matthews has been out, and now we're obviously without David Festa as well. I still say that they've held up their end of the bargain. They were expected to be one of the best or better pitching staffs in baseball. And even with all of that adversity, I think they've met that mark. But it comes down to the offense. And so the part that I think I almost took the opposite of approach or mindset of like, Twins fans are, yes, they have a right to be frustrated and disappointed, but honestly, are we that surprised? Because I put myself back into mid-March, when we're getting ready for the season, thinking of what the Twins could become and what they could do this year. And here's kind of what we knew. We knew the bullpen was going to be elite. Okay, check. That's happened. We knew the starting rotation was going to be one of the better rotations in baseball. And again, despite all the injuries, that's mostly happened. Take out the month of June where they went from like the best rotation ever in May to like the worst rotation ever in June. But take sans that month of June, they've held up their end of the bargain. So the wild card was always the offense, right? The way that they ended 2024, the last month and a half, they can score runs in droves, but they can also go games, weeks, and just completely disappear. And so the offense was the wild card. And so again, being frustrated and disappointed, I totally get that. But honestly, I don't think it's that surprising. The offense has been mediocre, and here we are at the trade deadline. The Twins are, 3-4 games below 500, something like that. The Twins are mediocre, despite the phenomenal pitching that they've gotten this year. So I guess frustrated and disappointed, sure, but just not really surprised that this is where they're at, even though like Baseball Prospectus, their PECOTA rankings and such actually had them winning the division, not handedly or anything. So it wasn't like it wasn't a lock by any means, but at the start of the season, they were projected to win the division by a handful of games with something like 92 wins or 89 wins, something like that. But I think that was almost just as likely as what we're seeing now, which is a mediocre team that's selling at the deadline.
Yeah, and we have a few questions that we can run through. We have our very own Gregory Masterson, Super Troll, asking us if we should trade Byron Buxton for picks. And Greg, I'm going to be gracious enough not to kick you out of the channel, unlike some other Twins Daily people have done in the past. We love Greg. Greg never takes anything too seriously, but no, obviously Byron Buxton is not being traded, and he knows that.
I'm actually headed to MLBTR right now because I just got a notification that they posted an update on controllable Twins pitchers. So I'm gonna go see what that has to say, and maybe we can chat about that. But yeah, I gotta love Greg and his Twitter persona especially.
Yes. Ellis Cards asked, should they trade Carlos? No, I don't think they should. Even if there is a buyer out there, which might be feasible, the Dodgers won't pick him up because nobody hates Carlos Correa like Dodgers and Dodgers fans. But there's always a team like the Yankees or maybe even the Red Sox if John Henry decides he wants to spend again. There's a few different teams that have really high payrolls that could probably afford to take Correa. I just don't see any point in trading him. The Twins aren't going to get anything substantial in return for him. And I'm not here to save the poll ads any money because, if you wipe 30 million off of a $140 million payroll, do you have any confidence that they're going to run it back up to 140 next year? I mean, they'll be like, thanks for taking 36 million off. We're going to let you spend 26 million of that back. And 26 million is not nothing, but the Twins then all of a sudden they don't have a shortstop anymore. Brooks Lee is not showing himself of being a capable shortstop. So they have to go get somebody. Now you're going to spend at least 12 million of that 26 million going to get a shortstop. Now, so you're dealing with very rapidly decreasing amounts of money. And in the end, is the team going to be better? I don't think so. I would much rather roll into 2026 hoping that Correa is just having just a bad season and he's going to get himself right. He's going to remember how to hit and he's going to give you, a 2, maybe 3 win season in 2026. I would, with everything else that's going on in the team, I would much rather bet on that being the case than leaving it up to the graciousness of the poll ads to be like, no, you got this money off the books, but we're gonna give it all back now. No, I don't buy that for a moment.
Yep, totally agree. Yeah, I think again, it depends on the route the Twins do decide to go. Like we've said, everything points to them mostly just trying to get rid of their rental options. If they do decide to trade a Joe Ryan, maybe even a Duran or Jax, then maybe they are looking at kind of a bigger sell off. But even in that case, let's say the Twins just decide to really just go all in and sell, even try to shop Pablo around. Um, Even in Pablo's case, like what are you going to get for C4 and Pablo right now? Pablo obviously
No.
he can be a great pitcher, but he's been hurt, and honestly, he's been up and down a lot over the
Yeah,
last few
last year
years.
wasn't particularly good.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're you're trading these guys that have that big name, they have that talent, but the production just hasn't been there. So you're kind of selling low. And yeah, to your point, between those two names, they're making what $50 million combined, something like that. And
Yeah,
to your
actually
point,
closer to 6. Well, next year it'll be probably closer to 60 because Correa's what, 35? And maybe that starts going down next year. And Pablo's at 21,
yeah,
I
you're
think,
right.
something like that.
I was trying to do math on the fly with I know the top three combined are guaranteed for about 77 minus 15 would be more about 60, not 50. So, but yeah, I don't have any confidence that if they were to deal those two, that they would be like, all right, now you have an extra $60 million on the books that you can work with as a front office. So, I just don't think now, even if they were to go like kind of full on rebuild, I don't think now is the time to try to trade C4 or Pablo. So totally agree with you
Pablo
there.
would just be such a poor return for the caliber of pitcher he is right now because no one's going to give you Pablo Lopez value for Pablo who ain't pitching right now. And because no matter whether you're confident he's going to come back from the injury or not, he has not yet come back from the injury. And teams are going to hedge their bets against that and not offer you value commensurate with his talent level. So I wouldn't even consider trading Lopez. I think it's really unlikely they could move Correa, and even if they could, they're not going to get any kind of value for him. So I'm not here to, you know, get the poll ads an extra $20 million, and I would not advocate for moving Correa whatsoever.
Yep, totally agree there. So yeah, just had pulled up, saw that MLBTR had kind of posted an update on the Twins' controllable pitchers. Not really anything too groundbreaking here. Just kind of summarizing what's been laid out over the last couple of days. So we had Jeff Passan reporting earlier this week that if they were to trade Duran and or Jax, they are looking for at least multiple top 100 prospects for each of those names.
That's
Um,
insane. I mean, more power to him. Try to get that. You're not going to get that for any reliever.
I,
That is an absurd ask, but it's also, while being an absurd ask, an entirely reasonable place to start the conversation. Just do
mhm.
not expect to get that.
Yep, totally agree. I do find it interesting because I didn't see this, that I think where was it? Uh, Alden Gonzalez of ESPN does get the sense that they are going to move at least one of the two at the deadline, which I hadn't seen anything that had gone that far yet. I pretty much had just heard that, again, they're open to trading them. This is what the ask is going to be. But this is the first that I'm seeing that they are actually, that somebody's getting the sense that they are willing to move one of the two. The other name that is interesting that was brought up in this update that hasn't really been talked about is Brock Stewart as a
Yes, that
potential.
is. I was going to bring him up next.
Yeah, controlled through the 2027 season. So that's another guy like Duran, like Jax, like Ryan. 2.5 years of team control, and of course
But
he
he
has.
is 33.
Yep,
Yeah, 33. Yeah,
he's
quite a bit older.
definitely on the older end of things, and obviously his injury history is not great. I think he was even out of baseball for a little bit
He was.
before the
Yes.
Twins brought him back, and he's kind of reestablished himself. But that's obviously going to be in the back of any team's minds who's trying to acquire him. So, obviously not going to get anywhere near anything in return for Brock Stewart that you would for Duran or Jax, obviously. But that's just a name that was interesting because that's not one that has really been thrown about or has been involved in any rumors to this point.
Yeah, he really hasn't. And I found that interesting as well because that's really an interesting fallback for a team that looks at Duran or Jax and then here's two top 100 prospects. And while choking down their laughter, says, okay, well, what about Stewart? He's an interesting fallback that will cost a fraction in prospect capital that a Duran or Jax would. But ultimately, you might not get dissimilar production from him, at least for the next year, year and a half. There is a much higher risk variance with him, but in the here and now, he's a very good relief pitcher who you're totally comfortable slotting into the eighth inning. I don't think a lot of contenders would want him as the closer, possibly, but as a seventh or eighth inning guy, especially when you get in the postseason, if his arm is still going at that point, very valuable piece for a contender to pick up.
Yeah, honestly, it almost feels like a Twins move. Like if the Twins
It
were going
does.
to
Yeah,
be
that's a good point.
buyers at the deadline, using the last couple deadlines as an example, where a buyer for the Twins means that they add some kind of middling reliever. Now, I would say Brock Stewart might be a step above that, but
Yeah.
I would anticipate that if a team were to add a Brock Stewart, and you were to go and find that team's Twitter community, they would probably be making some sarcastic comments. Their Gregory T. Mastersons would be having a field day with that ad. But I think he's very underrated because again, he's not a middling reliever. He's a little bit better than that. But of course, he comes with that injury history and a lot of
Yeah.
risk as well. But yeah, that's a name that's popular here too.
I'd like to
So
see the
that's
Twins move a reliever explicitly because of what we're talking about here. You have Duran, you have Jax, you have Stewart, and then you have a guy we haven't even talked about, Varland. And if you're a team that can't hit its way out of a wet paper bag, maybe you don't need four shutdown relievers, especially if one of those guys has 2.5 years of control and can pull in some like legitimate offensive talent that can be ready, not 4 years from now, but maybe next year or the year after. It seems like poor asset management of a team that is as upside down as the Twins to not really explore trying to get some bats in exchange for some of their relievers.
Yep, absolutely. And I want to get your thoughts on if the Twins were to trade Duran or Jax, but still kind of have this again. at the deadline, they trade their expiring guys, and then maybe one of these two elite relievers. What would you be looking for in return? Because for me, I would be wanting somebody who maybe is in AAA right now, a prospect that's in AAA, but that could impact 2026, right? Like if they retain Joe Ryan, and obviously the top three that we've talked about, then that tells me that they believe enough, at least in this core, that they are gonna kind of again try to run it back in 2026 more or
Mhm.
less. And so if that is the case, like I don't really want a low level, even if they're a top 100 guy, I don't really necessarily want a low level prospect for Duran or Jax or something
No,
like that. Like I'd want somebody who could make an impact on 2026.
absolutely. And asking for two top 100 guys for just one of them, I mean, that's not going to happen. But you might be able to get a top 100 guy who's in Double A or higher. And it's impossible to predict who that might be. There's a million different ways you could go across 29 farm systems. But the Twins also have these really useful pieces in Castro and Bader. And maybe you can get a little bit more for Duran plus Bader. I mean, Dave Dombrowski still runs the Phillies. That means the Phillies still have no bullpen. They always need bullpen help. Maybe Dombrowski's like, you know what? And he doesn't care about prospects. He only uses them as vehicles to keep trying to win now. I'm not that familiar with the Phillies system, but if you pair Bader and in with Duran or Jax, the Phillies outfield's in pretty sad shape. They have Max Kepler, who's below he's sub replacement level right now. Maybe that gets you somebody who's closer to the bigs, a little bit more of a sure thing than taking a flyer on, a high A guy who might be ranked 75th.
Yeah, I think that would be the route to go for me is get somebody who's close to or even maybe already kind of competing at the big league level or for a big league spot, so that we can see that impact in 2026.
Mhm.
Now, all of that said, it's interesting. I think some names that haven't really been floated around, just probably because of their production, are Trevor Larnach and Matt Wallner. And the Twins have, speaking of 2026 and guys who could maybe impact, you've got Walker Jenkins doing really well at Double A since returning from his injury. You've got Emmanuel Rodriguez, who's a pretty polarizing guy. I'm not convinced that his plate approach can translate to the major league level. I think I saw somebody say he's basically Edward Julian, except he can play in the field. And so obviously we've seen how that works out, but at the same time, they're two different players. The approach could work at the plate, but just that's obviously not a guarantee. But yeah, at the beginning of the year, thinking more back in like January, February time, I was kind of the mindset that, like, I mean, you've got Larnach and Wallner, who are basically two different guys that do the same thing. They play corner outfield who can't hit lefties. So at that time, I was already kind of thinking, like, do the Twins try to flip one of them for, whatever, some help elsewhere? And again, haven't seen those names floated around at the deadline here, probably because of their production, especially Wallner. But I'd be interested to just see the Twins kind of pursue that. And if you are looking towards 2026, then maybe you go all in on relying on either Rodriguez or maybe even Jenkins to kind of make an impact on the lineup and move on from one of Larnach or Wallner.
Yeah, in the case of Wallner, a team would really have to love Matt Wallner to give any kind of value for him right now. He needs to stop getting beat on fastballs before any team is really going to trade for him. Larnick's a much more interesting case. He's more expensive. He has less service time left, less control time left. But he's also hitting righties pretty well. Like if a team has a specific need where they're like, we can handle the middling defense, subpar defense, to be honest. And we also have some room at DH, which would be a preferable place to play Larnach. But we are not maximizing our performance against right-handed pitching. If there's a team out there that needs that specific set, and I don't know of one offhand, but if there is, Trevor Larnach could be a very appealing piece to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Wallner is right now where Larnach was a year ago. A year ago, Larnach was spending time with the Saints because he couldn't hit off speed.
Oh,
Uh,
Larnach
like,
spent like 3 years in that state, to be
yeah,
fair. I mean, it was a prolonged period of time. He was injured or really just not a good enough hitter to warrant his bad defense.
yeah, exactly. And that's basically where Wallner is at.
Yeah.
The difference, obviously, is that Larnach has turned it around. But what could be encouraging for a team to maybe look at acquiring a Larnach is that he has shown the ability to overcome that, right? Like he can,
Yes.
like you said, he can now handle right-handed pitching and he can hit off-speed pitching, and he's been a serviceable-ish outfielder, enough where he's providing enough on offense that you can deal with his defense.
Yeah.
And that's so Wallner right now, if he a year from now, if he can show that same type of improvement, then maybe Wallner is a little bit more appealing. With just, I mean, he still has posts the highest exit velocities that you're going to see in baseball and hits the
Oh,
ball.
just absurd. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just wild. But yeah, he can't catch up to the fastball, which is a huge issue. Doesn't play defense particularly well. Has a plus arm at least. So not much of a market for him. But yeah, I mean, depending on how much you really believe in Rodriguez, maybe even Jenkins impacting 2026. Just kind of interesting to me, I guess, that we haven't seen anything floated around on Larnach. But in the same vein, we talking about pull ads and money and all that kind of stuff. Larnach's pretty cheap, so that also could be part of that reason too.
Yeah, and Larnach is getting more run against lefties this season than he has in the past. And a lot of fans just are reluctant to admit this, but unless you're Barry Bonds or Joe Mauer, if you are a left-handed batter, you should not be batting against left-handed pitching. You just shouldn't. Like even Justin Morneau, who had some stellar years, was average against left-handed pitching. Uh, all the damage that he did was against righties. You have to be the elite of elite bats as a lefty to deserve hitting against left-handed pitching. And when you're talking about guys like Wallner and Larnach and that level of player, they just shouldn't be hitting against lefties. And the fact that Larnach is getting so much run against left-handed pitching this year is dragging down his numbers more than he deserves, to be frank.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Max Kepler earlier, and I mean they're kind of all built in the same build, and
Yeah.
um, it's almost like, did we not learn with Kepler where he's basically a full-time right fielder, had great defense, maybe not great, but had really good
Oh,
defense.
legitimately great for several years. He's no longer at that level, but he was the best right fielder in baseball for at least a couple of years.
Yeah.
He had some stellar defensive years.
Yep. And so that probably kept him in the field against left-handed hitters, or in the lineup against left-handed pitchers, rather, more than it should have. And again, generally, again, with the Phillies this year, he's kind of the same old Max Kepler, but haven't followed it closely. But I feel like I have seen that he is doing pretty well against righties, and I think they are kind of more platooning him against righties more than the Twins did. And so that's kind of the same boat that Larnach is going to be in, I think, even down the road. And hopefully Wallner can pick it up and turn it around a little bit so that he can at least become that. And so, yeah, to your point, I think we just have to, like you point out, I mean, you point out Morneau, even a great hitter like that who won an MVP, was on pace for another MVP in 2010, was average against left-handed hitters. And if a hitter like that is going to be average, then you can expect less for most left-handed hitters, which
Yes.
Larnach and Wallner fit in that category with Kepler.
Ellis is asking, what do we do with the AAA talent like Edward Julian, Jose Miranda, and Austin Martin? You know, I've heard rumors that Falvey is trying to get some sort of value from Edward Julian and Jose Miranda. I have not heard anything about Austin Martin. But I still hold out a little bit of hope for Edward Julian that he can be a first baseman or a DH, and he's never going to slug the way you want him, a player at first or DH, to slug. But his eye is so good when he's going right that I still hold out hope that there's something good is going to come of him. Jose Miranda, I think there's really very little, if nothing, to be done about Jose Miranda and Austin Martin at this point. Martin might become a roving infielder slash outfielder, but he doesn't have the arm to ever be really good in the field. And I just don't have any confidence that he's going to hit enough to be the next Willie Castro even. So I think they're bordering on close to lost causes at this point, where you just hold on to him and hope that lightning strikes. But I can't imagine any team is going to give much of anything for any of them. And Luke Keeschel, you know, he hit great for what, 12 games, 20 games, whatever it was that he was up. But so did Edward Julian when he first came up. And once the league ran through him a few times, all of a sudden, not so great. So I'm hoping for the best for Keeschel. He was super impressive, but he's not the type of guy that you can just pencil him in and say, he's our second baseman in 2026 and feel confident that you're going to field a competitive team.
Yeah, really interesting cases, especially in the case of Julian and Miranda. Both guys experienced success at the big league level early in their careers.
Yeah.
And then really, like you said, I mean, I think the scouting report got out on them, and now they are in with the Saints. And I know Miranda in particular isn't doing very well, even with the Saints. Haven't
Yeah.
kept tabs on Julian, but um,
He had a
I
little
think if
bit of a
you
spike there, but I kind of lost track of him after that.
yeah, and I think that probably speaks to what he's doing down in St. Paul. If he was good enough, if he was doing well enough, we'd probably have seen him back up with the Twins at some point. Um, Austin Martin, I feel like maybe I'm a little bit more optimistic, just because he's only 26. So has some time to maybe turn things around, maybe bloom like late, like a Willie Castro did. To your point, I don't think he can become as good of a hitter as Castro was, but um, for me, I guess I think it might be kind of maybe I'm being swayed by just the draft capital and the kind of the prospect pedigree that he had for a while, but he's one that I guess I'm holding out a little bit of hope for. That maybe we can do something with him and he can become a serviceable utility guy off the bench. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, in terms of this trade deadline, I've heard the same things that you have, or seen the same things that you have, just that they are looking at or listening to what people might be willing to give up for Julian and Miranda. If they were to trade either of them, I wouldn't be sad if they were to retain them. That's fine too, just because you're not going to get anything for those guys
Yeah.
with
A
with
note
what they've shown.
A note is Julian has continued his hot streak that he started. He has an OPS of almost 900 in AAA since the beginning of June. So I
Okay.
knew he got hot in June, and he's not doing quite as well in July, but it's good enough where there is hope that he is going to turn it around and get back to where he was in his rookie year in the majors.
He's just no fun to watch. So that might be my
Yeah.
bias too. It's just
It's well, I mean, just stop that. Just wipe out he and put the Minnesota Twins are no fun to watch because they have not been an amusing, a fun, entertaining team for several years now. As a
Yep.
person who's also a Milwaukee Brewers fan, there could not be a bigger disparity in entertainment factor than bouncing between Milwaukee Brewers and Minnesota Twins games. And it's just one of many reasons why I think this organization needs to be shaken up. I don't know if that goes all the way to the front office. I would definitely think about replacing most of the coaching staff, including Baldelli. I like Baldelli. I think he's an adequate manager. I just don't think whatever's going on in that clubhouse and the flat play, I just don't think he's the right voice at the top anymore. And something needs to be done to make this team more entertaining. It is station to station, strikeout. It's just not a fun team. And this is a spectator sport. Baseball teams should be fun to watch. And I find myself aggravated more often by watching the Minnesota Twins than I am entertained.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people would agree with that, especially offensively outside of Buxton, of course.
Yeah.
It's just it's so bad to watch. The pitching can be fun. I mean, watching Joe Ryan go out there has been great. Obviously, Durant, Jacks, those guys. But overall, the product on the field is just it's just not fun. Um, I will say, I think back to, was it like what, 2021? Was that the year that we had Andrelton Simmons, where the team was
Sounds right.
not fun to watch, but was also like not likable.
Yes.
Like it was they were even just hard to cheer for. So I
Yeah.
would say like it's a little bit of an improvement from that. Like I don't not like any of the current Twins.
Yeah,
Bader
I
is
like everybody on the roster as human beings just fine. I just don't care
mhm.
for many of them as baseball players.
Yeah. Bader is fun, charismatic. My wife always says he looks like a cartoon character. And
Yeah.
so they have likable pieces, but yeah, just like you said, from a spectator standpoint, they're not fun to watch. And I go back and forth on the Baldelli thing, just because I think he's doing exactly what the front office wants. Not that
Yes.
I don't think it's to the point where he the classic trolls that people that he's a spreadsheet guy and whatever. Like I don't think he's being over managed or micromanaged by the front office, but I think they are aligned in what they believe in and analytics and all that kind of stuff. Um and so I just am not convinced that, let's say they fire Baldelli. I think they just find somebody else to kind of do the same things. Now, what I do
Yeah,
agree with you and wonder on is if Baldelli's message is starting to fall on deaf ears.
that's entirely my point.
Mhm.
Baldelli is not doing anything that the next manager under this front office is also going to do. I'm just wondering if the voice of Baldelli is no longer resonating within that clubhouse. And people unfairly largely bash Baldelli. Well, he manages by spreadsheet and yada 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 yada. Like you said, that's the front office doing that. And Baldelli is not the guy who's like, you know what, Derek Falvey, what I would really love is if you went and got me the slowest goddamn roster in Major League Baseball. That is really my dream roster. I want a roster that strikes out a bunch and is the absolute slowest in baseball. No, of course not. Rocco Baldelli, he was a player. He was a center fielder. He stole bases. He ran like a madman. He was athletic as hell. Give him a team that more resembles the way he played, and I suspect the team would be a lot more entertaining to watch. He doesn't get to choose the roster. He doesn't choose Larnick, Wallner, Correa, France. I mean, everybody on this roster, other than Buxton and Bader, are slow. Castro is no longer all that fast. He's fine-ish, but you're talking about two guys who are legitimately fast out of 13 position players.
Yep. Yeah, and to your point, I'll just we're trying to focus on trade deadline stuff, but a one thing I've tried to beat the drum on is for people just to like sit back and consider who and what Baldelli has had to work with. I know the ownership deal, it's kind of old to listen to, but you talked earlier about Michael A. Taylor, and he happened to have a great maybe career year for the Twins. 2 years ago, which turned out great. But now, like you pointed out, look at him now. He's not even in baseball anymore. And
Yeah.
if you were to go back to, 2020, 2021, 2022, and just like go back and on baseball reference, bring up the rosters, the number of people who provided significant innings for the Twins, both on the mound and in the field, in the lineup, etc. The number of Twins that provided significant innings that once they left the Twins, either were no longer in baseball or maybe had like a year or two where they kind of hung on, but basically were, you know, replacement level or worse. It's astounding,
Yeah.
and that's what Baldelli has had to roll out with. I mean, it's
Do
just
you do you honestly think that Rocco Baldelli was like, you know what I'd really love to have behind my oft injured center fielder? Jake Cave, a left-handed batter who can't really hit it all, can't play center field, but also can't play the corners because our two corner outfielders are also left-handed. Like that is not something Baldelli wants, and that is the front office's fault, and that is the Poled's fault. Because when you have a contending team like that, you should not be at the point where you're like, well, we don't have money for anything more than Jake Cave.
mhm.
Jake Cave didn't fit on this roster in any way, shape, or form, and that's on the front office. Like the fact that he couldn't play center, he was left-handed, nothing fit with Jake Cave. The front office gets some fault for that, but also ownership gets a lot of fault for being like, here's $5 million extra. Go get somebody who isn't Jake Cave.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I think kind of try to get on back on track here a little bit. I can't see any comments right now, so if any
Oh, you
other
can't.
questions do come in, just
Sure.
give a shout. But yeah, looking back at the deadline, we've talked about Castro, we've talked about Bader, Jax, Duran, Ryan. We've kind of talked about those names. You briefly mentioned Coulombe as a dominant lefty guy out of the bullpen. He's another guy that he's not going to fetch you a lot, but he's gonna be able to return you something. Um, Outside of those names, obviously Ty France is nothing.
No,
He's
he's
not
not going
gonna
to get anything.
no.
As sad as the first base situation is across baseball, and there are a bunch of contenders who legitimately need first baseman, Ty France is still somehow worse than anything they're going to be looking for anyway. He's basically off the table as being an option for any team. I mean, maybe some contender will take him for cash considerations or whatever, but I will be really disappointed if come August 1st, if Castro, Bader, and Coulombe in particular are still on this roster. And I would really, really like to see one of the three pitchers with control traded.
I agree with you, especially on the expiring guys. I wouldn't mind if they kept all three of Ryan, Duran, and Jax.
Yeah, that's not the end of the
Just
world.
yeah, especially since they're not expiring and they're not even they're controlled through 2027, so they're not even expiring next year either. And so again, just kind of with everything that we've heard, if they're kind of just looking to retool and mostly run it back for 2026, then I'd say I'm fine with them keeping those three guys at the top. But one position and two guys we haven't talked about at all would be Jeffers and Vasquez. I know
Ah, yes, Jeffers.
yeah, the Padres are in historically desperate need of a catcher who can provide like a WRC plus of 70, and that would be a massive upgrade. Uh,
It
with
would, sadly.
with crappy defense, that would also be an upgrade. And so those are Vasquez, obviously he's expiring, but he's also getting paid 10 million. You factor that down to we're over halfway through the season, so 4.5, 4 million, somewhere in there is what a team would be on the books for. He's obviously basically a negative at the plate. I honestly haven't seen how he's done defensively this year. I know last year was okay, but not great.
I
Um,
think he's a little subpar at this point, but
yeah,
he's not killing you out there as far as I know. Um, and we also run a Red Sox site, and who knows what Craig Breslow over there is thinking, but Red Sox fans would love to have Christian Vasquez back. And I keep trying to ask them, are you sure that we're talking about 2025 Christian Vasquez? And they are. But like I said last night on the podcast, is you put Vasquez back in Fenway. Maybe he rips two, three, four extra doubles that would have been out anywhere else. And all of a sudden he goes from being way underperforming offensively to just being bad offensively. And the Red Sox could really use a backup catcher. So you're not going to get anything for Vasquez. You are just saving the Pohlads some money. If you're going to move him, maybe that's okay. Go give him a chance to go back to Fenway where fans love him. That's great. Um, and Chris Hove, one of our TV writers, is talking about how the Cubs are desperate for a top end starting pitcher because they lost Justin Steele early in the season. And they're interested in Ryan. And that is a really interesting fit. Owen Casey is what Chris mentions here. I think the Twins might be more interested in Ballesteros because Ballesteros is much like what Ryan Jeffers was 5 years ago, where he's a guy who can hit, but nobody thinks he's going to be a catcher. Well, Ballesteros, it's more like there are questions surrounding whether he can be a catcher. The Twins might be able to work their catching magic again with Ballesteros, and that's a pretty good fit for both sides. Now, as the Twins, I would want more than Ballesteros, and what more that is, I'm not really sure. But if you also can throw Castro into that deal, maybe you can get Casey and Ballesteros. I don't think Jed Hoyer would be interested in doing that. That really strips down the Cubs farm system. But with Kyle Tucker being a free agent after this season, maybe Hoyer's just desperate enough to do something like that.
Yeah, I haven't looked into the Joe Ryan and seeing what's out there in terms of like potential trade packages, just because I'd be pretty disappointed if they did trade him. But yeah, I don't think it's out of the realm that a return like um, uh, was it Casey? I always say
Casey.
Cassie. Casey.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Casey. I always hear it referenced by Cubs fans as Casey.
Okay.
So I believe that is the correct pronunciation. One downside of Casey is he's a he is not dissimilar to Matt Wallner. Now he's more highly regarded than Matt Wallner ever was as a prospect, but he is a giant human being. I think his nickname's the Big Ginger, like bright red hair, total carrot top thing going on. He's a real big dude. He hits left-handed. He is probably an acceptable corner outfielder, but how many times do we have to go through this dog and pony show with the Twins where they have this left-handed hitting, glacially moving outfielder, and it has yet to really work out for them. Now, that is not an indictment of Casey. That's more of an indictment of the Twins, probably. And with that said, Casey is absolutely annihilating AAA pitching right now. Over the past couple months, I'm pretty sure, has a 4-digit OPS.
Yeah, I totally agree. Especially kind of what you called out there, just in terms of the kind of the plotting left-handed corner outfielder type, and how we've seen that over and over again with the Twins, and it just doesn't really pan out too much. And again, not an indictment on Casey, but just more an indictment on the Twins.
Yeah.
Um, I'd be probably more interested, and I don't know other teams' prospects super well, their lists. But if we were to trade Joe Ryan, I think I would be more interested in seeing a pitching prospect headline the return there, in hopes that, if you're trading Joe Ryan, to me, you're probably throwing in the towel for 2026, and waiting for we have a decent wave coming up, in Rodriguez, Jenkins, Zebby and Festa are already here, but they're still obviously young and kind of
Mhm.
developing. Um, Andrew Morris, Corey Lewis, Connor Preload. We can keep naming all these guys, right? Um, and so I would kind of want somebody who, when those guys are ready or close to being ready in 2027, 2028, maybe whatever it is, but probably not 2026. I'd rather want somebody in return for Joe Ryan who we could add to that list of guys of that could impact 2027, and maybe by 28, 29 they are a rotation ace of sorts.
Yeah.
But that's just me. I'm always going to lean towards a pitching prospect. You can never have enough pitching. Of course, the old adage from baseball perspectives, there is no such thing as a pitching prospect, is kind of the counter to
Yeah.
that. But I always will look to acquire pitching and make sure we have that depth before really anything else. But so
It's
yeah, we
certainly a lot harder to see a path to contention in 2026 if you trade Ryan. I don't think it's hard to see a path to contention at all if you trade Jax or Duran. In fact, if you get the right pieces back, I think the chances of contention will be higher. If you can bring back a legitimate bat, I don't know if that's going to be at even first base. Like if there's somebody who's limited defensively but is a legitimate first baseman and can hit major league pitching, the I would swap that guy for Duran or Jax in a heartbeat because the Twins have shown themselves capable of developing relievers in particular. But if you still have Joe Ryan on the roster and you have Bailey Ober and you have Pablo Lopez and you have all these guys, you start looking at Andrew Morris, Zebby, David Festa, Corey Lewis, and you start not necessarily framing those guys as we need these guys in the rotation next year. You start looking at them more in the case of, does this guy have a legitimate third pitch? Does this guy have a pitch to get righties and lefties out? Does this guy start for us? And any of those guys have the velocity where you can think about converting them to replace Jax or Duran as a reliever in 2026. So I think it's very easy to see the Twins contending next season while trading Duran or Jax. Can we just call him Duran from now on together? But it's a lot harder to see that if they trade Ryan.
Yep. Yep. And to your point, I mean, even Jax himself, converted starter. Louis Varland, converted starter.
Yep.
Cole Sands, convert. I mean, most relievers are
Yeah.
converted starters at some point, but those are guys who came to the big leagues as starters, didn't really pan out, and have converted to relievers, and obviously have been very productive and effective relievers. And so, I mean, even Joan Duran, did he make some big league starts before he officially
I
was moved to
don't
the
think he ever
bullpen?
made a big league start.
Okay,
I think they moved him to the bullpen in spring training, maybe. And he talked about how he wanted to go back to the rotation for like a year.
okay.
And that just obviously never happened. Alice is talking about Joe Ryan to the Red Sox for Jarren Duran. That's simply, I don't see that happening at all. Jarren Duran, great player, has serious upside in a variety of ways. Had like an 8-win season last year, but it looks like that was an outlier season. He bats left-handed. He's a center fielder, but maybe more like a Max Kepler tweener than a true Byron Buxton, Harrison Bader center fielder. And his offense has dropped right back down to 105, 110 OPS plus this season. I think that's more where he's going to be for his career. And which is fine. That's a valuable player. That's a, 3, 4, maybe 5-win player in some seasons. It's not a great fit for the Twins. The Twins need guys who can plate runs. And whether that's through high batting average, on base percentage, the whole gamut, whether those are high slug guys, whatever. Jarren Duran just isn't bringing that offensive might that I think the Twins need right now.
Totally agree, and I don't think that'd be enough. Not that they were
No,
suggesting a
absolutely. You
one-to-one
would need
trade.
you would need Duran and some pretty high level prospects, which the Red Sox. Well, I mean, they don't have high level prospects anymore, but they have a lot of young players who just graduated out of prospect status who could fit that bill. But I just, knowing the Red Sox roster like I do, I just don't see a great fit with the Twins. Doesn't mean it's impossible. I just don't see a great fit. But back to what we were talking about earlier, Jeffers and the Padres is a great fit. The Padres, they have Machado, they have Tatis, they have Merrill, they have Cronenworth, they have Luis Ariz. Okay, maybe that's not a big positive, but their top end of their lineup is impressive. The bottom end of their lineup is the very opposite of impressive, and that is led by their catching tandem, which has an WRC plus of around 60. And that is led by co-starter Martin Maldonado. You thought he was a bad hitter 5 years ago? Well, you should take a look at 2025 Martin Maldonado. Ryan Jeffers would transform the Padres, but the Padres have some real logistical problems. They do not have a good farm system anymore. AJ Preller has been looting it for years. It is a bottom five in baseball farm system now. They have some really nice high end talent like Leo DeVries, Ethan Salas. I don't think they're interested in trading somebody like that for a year and a half of Ryan Jeffers. On top of that, Ryan Jeffers is in his last year and a half of team control. The Padres, you think the Twins don't have any money, the Padres have less. So there's going to have to be a lot of tomfoolery financially to make something like that happen. But if the Padres and Twins can get together and make something like that happen, the fit is outstanding. Like both teams could really walk away with some impressive hauls, and the Padres would get better immediately. They would stay better through next year. They could ditch Maldonado. The Twins, the Padres farm is not without talent. It is. There is some interesting stuff. It's just a matter of what would the Twins want for Jeffers, and trading Ryan Jeffers is a serious dent in 2026 contention because the Twins don't have anybody behind him.
Yeah, the Twins. We talked shortstop earlier and how kind of bleak that is behind Correa. I mean, we've seen it when he's been out. Catcher is probably even more bleak. They
I would
just
say it is because you can put Brooks Lee at shortstop. He can hold a glove and he can do the job on the dirt side of it that needs to be done. He's not going to be crazy. He's not going to be good at short, but he'll get you by. Offensively is where Brooks Lee has his problems. The Twins have nobody behind Jeffers and Vasquez.
Yep.
In fact,
Yeah,
they
I mean,
just released their two guys who were behind Jeffers and Vasquez.
yeah, and I was gonna mention that too. And the guy that they claimed, I think, was he with the A's, Johnny Parada or whatever
Yeah.
exactly his name was, has gone from, I think he started, was getting a little bit of time with the Reds, and then he got DFA'd with them, went over to the A's, and maybe I'm switching up the order of the teams that he did, but either way, he got DFA'd twice already this year, and now the
Yes.
Twins have claimed him. So that just speaks to the state of the position
Yeah,
behind
and
Jeffers.
it speaks really highly to like the Twins got rid of Jared Camargo and Diego Cartaya, who they picked up from the Dodgers in spring training, I think, off season, can't remember, just before the season started. They got rid of both of those guys and they replaced them with Johnny, what's his face? Kenny.
Parada, something.
His honestly, his name doesn't matter because this is going to have no impact on the major league team. But
Mhm.
they got rid of two guys and replaced him with this guy. They have nothing. They have absolutely nothing in the high minors. What is the guy in the low and high A? Dia, who
Yeah,
maybe he's something, but he's going to be something in no sooner than 3 years from now.
yeah.
So there's really nothing happening. Perry asks if Ryan Jeffers for Cash Mayfield of the Padres. That is a really interesting pick. Mayfield, like Perry says here, he looks legit, and he's only in high A, I think.
That sounds
Yeah,
right.
he's not in double A yet. Uh, he is a big, I think, lefty. Is he a lefty? I'm gonna have to look here. Yeah, he's a big lefty. Which he's a very interesting piece. And given how the Twins don't have any lefty starters, it's not something I really care about. I don't really care with which hand a person throws, but it is nice to have a lefty or two in a rotation. And the Twins seem pretty adept at taking those big guys and being like, we're going to get you throwing at your 95th percentile, whether that's 95 or 99. Hard to say, but that's a really interesting uh, trade for Jeffers. I think it might take more than just Mayfield, but I don't think it would take much more than Mayfield to get Ryan Jeffers. Probably a low minors, something close to a flyer. But maybe you could get more from Preller if, yeah, okay, I'm not going to laugh while I'm saying this, but if the Twins took on some of Jeffers' 2026 money.
The Padres are a really interesting fit for the Twins, just because, as you know, kind of loosely following them as I kind of read up rumors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They have a good bullpen, but outside of that, even offensively, it's like it's actually kind of confounding to me, and I'd probably be able to figure out if I looked into it a little bit more. But that they are where they're at in the standings and their record and such, just because I look at their offense and I'm like, it's hard to pinpoint. Catcher is a clear need, but it's hard to pinpoint like even just like that's the only spot. It just seems like they could literally benefit from upgrading almost anywhere.
They
Um,
could. Like they have Gavin Sheets, notorious designated hitter playing left field.
yeah,
God, they would love to get Gavin Sheets back in the DH spot where he belongs. They If they keep Sheets in left field, they have Luis Ariz at first. They would love to slide Luis Ariz to DH and put a big lumbering, as Greg would say, a giant dude who dings dongs at first base. There's a lot of different ways the Padres can upgrade, and the back half of their position players, I would say the bottom six guys are fungible. You could just replace them in a heartbeat, put a guy who is competent with a bat, competent defensively, any combination of the two, and they get better. And they get quite a bit better. And they would get better just as the Dodgers are really showing themselves to be human. The Dodgers bullpen, to say it's in ragtag shape is an understatement. I don't even know if they have any bullpen arms left at this point. The Padres have a real opening to get back in that division race. They just need to find a way to get creative with money. But if they can get creative with money, they could slide all sorts of guys into all sorts of different positions, and their offense would get a lot better. Surprisingly, the Padres pitching has been really good. And I didn't really expect that, even though they pitch in Petco. But they lost Yu Darvish to start the season. He just came back, but they've been throwing out some pretty questionable rotation pieces, and they're really performing. They lost Tanner Scott uh, in this offseason, but their bullpen is still chugging along and really pitching well. So if they can find a way to improve that offense, they could be a real contender in October.
yeah. Yeah, and I think I know we're kind of talking about Jeffers to the Padres, but you look at the list that we have up right now, and they could use multiple players. So it would be
Yeah,
interesting. Again, money is an issue for both clubs,
yeah.
um, and might be a hindrance there. But it would be interesting to see like almost like a mega deal where the Padres could make it a one-stop shop and address multiple needs. And the Twins, you pointed out they don't have a deep farm system, but they do have some top end talent. And so,
Yeah.
a guy like Cash Mayfield, Ethan Salas, guys like that would be interesting to see if the
If
Padres
there's a way to
were
pry Leo DeVries from them, that would be an outstanding get.
he's been
But
on
it's
a
going to take a
tear this
lot.
year. Hmm.
It's going to take a lot to get Leo DeVries. Leo DeVries is I think, 19-year-old shortstop. He is currently is he playing in Fort Wayne right now, which means he's in high A? He might still be in Lake Elsinore, which is single A. I can't remember. But he's the best shortstop prospect in baseball by a lot
Hmm.
of analysts measure. He is a legit shortstop, and it is likely, given his age and his performance, he is going to hit as he gets older, and he's going to stick at shortstop. So if he's able to do that, he's going to be an incredibly valuable player.
Well, what's interesting with the Padres is that just a couple days ago, it's kind of rumored that they're willing to give up and move Dylan Cease. And so, again, going back to the list that we have, Joe Ryan at the top. That I would think that if we were to get DeVries from them, it would have to include Joe Ryan in that trade, just because he's got a lot of helium right now, and the only reason I know that is because in a dynasty fantasy league I'm in, I traded him kind of towards the start of the season as a contender, and then immediately after that, all I see on my Twitter is how great he is. So, yeah, he has a lot of helium right now. He would be a great get for the Twins, especially as we talked about already. They don't really have a great shortstop situation behind
Yeah.
Correa. But I think it would cost Joe Ryan for sure to land him.
Yeah, I would think so. And the Padres, again, they're dangling Dylan Cease not because they want to, but because if they're going to acquire major league talent, they need to find a way to make it work financially. And one way for them to do that is to dangle some of their pitching, like I just referenced earlier. Their pitching has been surprisingly good this season. And if they move Cease, who is making, I can't remember, 12, 14 million, something, somewhere in that range, if I remember it correctly, um, they can get somebody back of equal value where, yeah, they lose Cease, but they get a hitter, which they need more than a pitcher. But they really need that pitcher in October too. They want to keep Dylan Cease. I just looked up the hitting splits on the Padres. They are around 20th in WRC plus against left-handed uh, pitching. So they're better against righties. Maybe Larnach is a fit. I don't see him being necessarily a great fit, but he would improve the team in a variety of ways. Just I don't think he's really packing the most punch for what the Padres need.
Yeah, absolutely agree. All right. Well, I think we've talked obviously a lot about the names that we see on the list there. We talked catcher position a little bit. Even talked about guys that are very controllable in Larnach and Wallner. Again, just to try to just really get past this. Gregory T. Masterson brought up earlier about trading Buxton for a bucket of baseballs or something because he's going to get hurt tomorrow, I think is the general idea there. That's not going to happen. He's on a no trade clause, so we can move past trying to trade him. But it'll be really interesting to see what the Twins do. Again, other than John Heyman, we haven't gotten like clear direction on just
No.
how much selling they're going to do at the deadline. And so, yeah, I'm really interested to see kind of what the next week looks like for the Twins. And even beyond that, like once they do sell, I would love to see for the rest of the season, like, let's get Sabato up here. He's
Might as
had a great
well. I mean,
year.
if you're not trying to win, why is France playing? I
Yeah.
mean, you might as well run Aaron Sabato out there and see if his little hot streak in AAA is for real or not. And it's not going to tell you if it's for real, but it might give you a better indication
Mm-hmm.
of what you have going into 2026. And I would hope at the very least we get to watch some of these guys in August and September who might be here for later years, and Sabato is maybe the best example. And get Julian back up here, just see what he does. I don't know about Miranda; he's been so bad, but Keishow's coming back. He can play second, and you're going to want to move Julian to DH because Julian should not have a baseball glove on his hand.
Yeah.
He just shouldn't. I mean, there's a lot to be interested in the team, both here and now. And I just hope that somebody is going to tear the Band-Aid off on the trade deadline. For people who are mainly Twins fans, don't follow the rest of the league, absolutely nothing has happened. Like, there are a bunch of teams that are going to start selling and buying very soon, but nobody has done it. The Red Sox traded Rafael Devers, a month ago, but that was an organizational issue with Devers as a human being. That was not about on field. That was not an on field. That was not a baseball move. That was a decision made for a lot of the reasons from Craig Breslow down. We have yet to see a baseball trade of substance happen. And it's going to happen any minute now. And then once it does, I expect to see this stuff start falling fast and furious.
Yep, I totally agree. I mean, it's just I think that's how trade deadlines are going to work now.
Yeah,
Is
with the
with
playoff
the
format,
expanded
they almost
playoffs. I
have
mean,
to.
yep, yep. I mean, the big thing today is the Arizona Diamondbacks after their loss last night. Everybody's kind of just now, a week before the trade deadline, is just now saying, yep, they're nothing confirmed, but they're probably now going to be sellers because of how they've come
Yeah,
out of the All-Star game. So
and there's
that's just
not
how
a whole lot. They are perhaps the other really intriguing seller, except they're the exact opposite of the Twins. They are bad because their pitching sucks, and the Twins are bad because their hitting sucks. So the Diamondbacks are going to have some really interesting hitting pieces. Their pitching, there's not a lot that people are going to be clamoring over. The Twins are absolutely stop 1A and maybe 1B, other than Cleveland, who might be trading Clase.
Yep.
There's a lot of interesting stuff there, but the Diamondbacks are really interesting. And like on the Twins Daily forums 3 weeks ago, people were like, "Oh, should the Twins buy or sell?" And I'm like, given the playoff format, nobody is going to, nor should they make a decision about this until like July 25th at the very earliest. There's no reason to. Even the Oakland A's and Colorado Rockies have not sold yet. And they've been sellers since the season opened. Well, the A's kind of started off well, but everyone knew they were going to sell. They haven't even started moving players yet. So if those teams aren't moving players, why do you think the Twins and Diamondbacks are going to be moving players? No, they're going to wait until the last minute because they can, and because it's the prudent baseball decision to make. Is we want to make sure we're out of the race before we trade, because there's absolutely nothing to be lost by waiting. You're not leaving an extra top 100 prospect on the table by not trading somebody on July 20th. That's just not how any of this works.
Yep. Totally agree. One last thought that I've been pondering the last couple of days. Let's assume that a week from today, August 1st, so a week from tomorrow, whatever, the Twins have retained Ryan, Duran, and Jax, but they've, Bader's gone, Castro's gone, a couple of Coulombe is gone, whatever. Do you see any chance of given that we have Keishel coming back, who looked good in a very, very, very small sample, Pablo Lopez will be coming back, Zebi, he's back. Hopefully he'll kind of regain some. I don't know what's going on with Ober, what his timetable looks like, but we have some of these pieces that are going to be coming back maybe in August. Do you see at all a chance of like a 2017, I think it was, when they did sell at the deadline? The clubhouse was very vocal of how disappointed they were. I think Dozier in particular. And then what they came out and all of a sudden they were in the wild card game against the Yankees, of course, lost. But do you see any route where the Twins could actually kind of sell at the deadline, but still stumble their way into the playoffs?
Absolutely. I think if they trade their rentals, Coulombe, Castro, Bader, I don't think that really significantly changes their playoff chances. Because what's going to change their playoff chances, does Carlos Correa remember what he's supposed to do when he's holding a baseball bat? Does Royce Lewis, is this little 4-game hot streak he's on, is that for real? That's what the Twins' playoff chances are banked on. They have the pitching staff to get to the postseason. It's all about whether the guys that they have, are they going to remember how to hit a baseball? And that's like multiple guys. That's Wallner, that's Correa, that's Lewis. It's probably a guy popping up like Keishel or Julian coming back and hitting. They need to hit. And taking away Willie Castro and Harrison Bader is not going to really change how the Twins hit. They're pretty decent hitters, but they're 100, 105, 110 OPS guys. They're not lighting the world on fire. What you need is Royce Lewis to decide he's a 150 OPS guy for 2 months. That's what's going to get the Twins in the playoffs. So trading any of these rentals, I don't think it really moves the needle much. It might take them from 8% to 6%, but what does that really mean in the grand scheme of things?
Yep, totally agree. Yeah, I think especially Royce is kind of a wild card in this, just because he can get so hot, as we've seen in years past, and not only that, but just the charisma that he has, and I think he's the type that baseball can be very like. The word is escaping me right now. It's a very simple word, but the team, they fail together but they win together too. And he's one that can ignite when he's hot. Contagious. There we go. Holy smokes, contagious. He is the type that with just his charisma and his swag and all of that, the non-tangibles, he's the type that when he's on, that can be contagious to everybody else. And so to your point, if he can stay hot and that can kind of seep into the rest of the lineup, I totally agree. I think the Twins could sell. The issue, I think the biggest issue, the biggest difference would be with Bader gone, who is that fourth outfield option that can, give Larnach and Wallner a rest against righties. But outside of that, yeah, I think the chances probably of making the playoffs probably don't change a lot. And if
Yeah.
Royce gets hot, I think some good things could happen with everybody else too.
Yeah, I mean, functionally, you are going to have to replace performance, especially defensively from Bader, and versatility wise with Castro. But maybe you're able to call up Austin Martin, and Austin Martin can hit for a 90 OPS plus and fill in, two or three of the positions that Castro once did. There are paths to this that I don't see really change by moving any of the rentals. It's all
Yep.
about the reason the Twins are in the position they're in needs to be the reason why they compete. Like, they're terrible because all those guys I mentioned earlier can't hit. Well, those guys need to start hitting, and whether the role players are on the team or not, I don't think is going to matter much.
Yep. Totally agree.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to talk about, Matt?
No, I think we covered almost everything. That was good.
Yeah. Fun.
But
I've
yeah.
never actually done anything like this free form before, but Matt and I spend our entire July just mired in trade rumors. So it kind of felt like a logical fit for us to jump on here and talk about it for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to had the idea to do this today because later this afternoon I am going to be making a long form video, kind of having a lot of the same, talking about a lot of the same things, just the route the Twins could go and whether they kind of retool for 2026 by just selling those rentals or do maybe more of a mini rebuild by trading a Joe Ryan type. So keep an eye on that for Twins Daily. And then yeah, about a week from now, once we know kind of what they did at the deadline, then look out for another video of kind of what to expect from the last 2 months. And
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, so but yeah, this was a lot of fun. I'm glad that we did it, and
Yeah.
hopefully, who knows, maybe something crazy will happen in 2 months from now. We can get together and do a little preview of like an October matchup.
Yeah, and if possible, maybe Matt and I can coordinate something for next week, a couple days before the deadline,
Yeah.
if we start hearing substantial movement on some of this stuff, which, as I said earlier, nothing has happened. There has been no real movement in any direction by any team, but that's going to change soon, and maybe we'll be able to jump back on here and talk about that when that happens.
Yeah, I'd love that. That sounds great.
Okay. Thanks for checking in with us, everybody. This was a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll see you early next week. Keep an eye on Twins Daily. We'll try to announce this one a little bit more ahead of time.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.